Welcome back to the BTS Happy Hour podcast. I'm your host, Andrea. With me today is Morgan.
Hey, what's up?
On August 6th, a Japanese idol named Tagoshi Yuya, a former member of the Japanese idol group News, recently came out with a book, and he was talking about the reason behind the success of Twice and BTS. And BTS has gained enough popularity to perform in the Grammys, and Twice as well has international members from Japan and Taiwan, and so they're able to sing in multiple languages, including English. And then he said, if we studied English like BTS and were composed of international members like Twice and attempted to expand worldwide, then we would be number one in the world. We would have made our way onto America's Billboard charts. So a lot of people didn't like the way he said that or what he's saying. Basically kind of, they thought he's discrediting, the hard work that they did to make it in the Western market.
So this is a Japanese, what is he?
I guess a retired idol that he wrote a book about.
A Japanese idol?
Mm-hmm.
How old is he? He used to be a singer though, a Japanese singer.
He's 32 years old.
Oh, so he's not even that old or anything.
No, but I guess he's done with, because he was in at least two groups.
Like the equivalent of like a K-pop group, but in Japan?
Yeah, sounds like it.
A Japanese idol.
But it sounds like he's more, a lot of fans kind of took that as, he's just discrediting BTS and Twice because they worked hard to get where they are. It's not just because some of them could kind of speak English, which they're not even really strong in those areas.
There's only one that can. First of all, he sort of has the facts wrong. There's only one BTS member who speaks English well.
Exactly.
And there are 0 Twice members that speak English. But regarding his larger point, I do agree with him. And let me explain why. When you go all the way back to the 80s, when sort of Japanese culture was in ascendance, there was a prime opportunity for them to sort of leverage their culture as a real export, right?
Yeah.
And because culture is a thing that's exported, just like Americans have exported culture for many, many years to, I would argue, great effect. The entire world watches our movies. China watches Marvel films. Has nothing to do with their culture or anything, but they give us tons of money because they like Marvel movies. Japan had that opportunity, but they didn't see that as part of the big picture. They were focused more on, making cars and other industries and things like that, electronics.
Right. They weren't about conquering the culture.
Right. Whereas Korea did identify that as an export, as a thing to focus on. So they did invest in their culture, the Hallyu wave, as people call it, right? And, learning English and making it more accessible to other cultures, that was part of it. So I do think that's what he's referring to. I do think that's accurate. If Japan had jumped on this same concept in the 80s, they would have predated what the Koreans did, because Japan had this opportunity.
Yeah,
they were
could have done that.
A rich, successful country at that time. They had their own culture. They could have done this sort of stuff in the 80s. But they didn't. They focused on other things. And then in the 90s and beyond, Korea sort of focused they on the Hallyu wave, and they said, we can export culture and we can invest in K-pop and things like that. So, and Japan, as far as I know, Japan never did that. So I'm not going to say he's bitter, but he is commenting on the fact that Japan never made a national push for this sort of thing. And that is correct. I would say he's accurate in saying that. If Japan had made a national push for this sort of thing, they would have been more successful in this sort of thing.
I think Japan is still like that. Like even today, they're not really trying that hard to get Western audiences for their groups.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And they don't have to. They're not obligated to.
Yeah.
But Korea really made a push for their culture to be, disseminated to other countries outside of Korea. And Japan never made that effort. So I don't think it's discrediting it. I think it's more of a criticism of the policies of the Japanese government. Like, Japan, you could have made Japan this in the 80s, but you failed to, And then Korea identified this opportunity and they did push their culture. So I don't think it's a criticism of them. I think it's a criticism of Japan, right?
Yeah.
Because they fail to push their culture in the same way. So if you're offended by it because you think that he's criticizing BTS, I think that's off base. I think he's more criticizing the Japanese government for not identifying and investing in pushing their culture abroad. That's what I think.
I think he is trying to just be matter of fact about it and not say, oh, this is BTS. This is the only reason why BTS is big, because they have an English speaker. He's not trying to say that. He's like saying our group could have been a lot bigger if Japan was more like Korea in that aspect of trying to push you to the international audience. And I mean, that's just how it is. Like, if you're in Japan, like, you can't really help how your country is.
So the specifics of the facts, I think he does get wrong, because obviously Twice doesn't have a lot of English speaking members. BTS only has one, right? It's not like they're not like Blackpink. But I think his broader point is accurate in that Japan never made an effort to push their culture abroad, whereas Korea has. And that has helped. That has absolutely helped. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say he's resentful. I don't know this person personally or anything. Maybe he is resentful.
Yeah, it's hard to tell his feelings from a translation. Well, do you think, is he talking about in the 80s when Japan was kind of like having a really good economy?
I don't know. I mean, he's only 32, so I'm not sure that 80s is really on the top of his mind.
Oh, okay.
Or anything. But Japan has never really pushed it as an export.
Well, I was going to say maybe Japan doesn't think America would be open to that, and that's why they didn't do it, and that's why they don't
Possibly.
Remember back when America thought, oh man, Japan is going to take over like all our companies. They're so rich. They're doing so
80s.
well. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe they thought, oh, America isn't going to accept our groups. They're not. Why should we try to like push them to be popular over there? Like maybe they thought, oh, we wouldn't be accepting of that because we see them as villains.
Yeah, well, perhaps. But they still try to sell us their cars, so they didn't really think we're that, and they've 100% succeeded. Japanese cars are just so massively successful. I don't think that's it. They just didn't focus on culture.
Yeah.
They didn't think, oh yeah, this is something we can export to. And maybe this guy is rightly pointing out that, hey, guys, we could have exported this. And then you let Korea sort of jump into that vacuum. Yeah. And now they've got a wave. Their culture is going into the West, and that could have been us.
Yeah.
I think that is a fair observation. His specifics, yes, if you're going to nitpick the specifics, they're incorrect.
Like, he should really be talking about Blackpink because they have more English speakers.
Yeah, and he also should be just talking about, in a more general sense, that Korea is pushing its culture as an export.
Yeah.
Whereas Japan has never made a concerted effort to push its culture as an export. That's a fair point.
Yeah, Japan isn't doing that. I couldn't tell you any of their like most popular groups. Like, remember, there's some group from Japan has like the highest selling album this year, and I'm like, I've never heard of this group, but okay, I guess they're really popular. They've sold that many albums. But yeah, they don't try to be popular outside of Japan, it seems like.
They're very insulated in their culture, so they're not trying to push that else. Well, I mean, maybe one exception I can think of is maybe video games. I do see some Japanese video games come out here, but even that, not that many. Not that many, because there's a lot of really popular Japanese video games that don't even get an American or an English version. And I wonder why. It was a popular game with you guys. Why don't you at least make an English version and see if we like it? Mm-hmm. Whatever. I mean, I know the backlash immediately is, oh, you've got the facts wrong. And are you trying to discredit BTS? But I do think that his point broadly is fairly made. Japan just has not made that effort. And, in an alternate history, maybe if they did make that effort, we'd be all talking about Japanese groups.
Yeah.
Because they definitely had, I think they started seeping into American culture earlier than Korea.
Yeah,
in the 80s.
Like people were liking anime and stuff like that.
They were liking anime, they were eating sushi. I mean, all these things are sort of tied together, right? So they could have also pushed idol groups or something like that.
Their music could have been part of that. Yeah. But they didn't really try.
No, they didn't. They just figured that, no, it's our music. You won't like it.
And even like the video games, it's like they made the video games but then they didn't try to do anything that's like America based or, catered to the market. It's like, well, if you like it, you like it.
And even
whatever.
their video games, they sort of catered it to Americans in the first place. Like, think about Nintendo. Some of the first Nintendo games are made were like Mario Brothers and Zelda. It wasn't a Japanese cultural thing.
Oh, that's true.
They made a thing that they thought that either the Western market would be receptive to, or that a worldwide market would be receptive to.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't try to export something uniquely Japanese.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So if I were a Japanese idol, I would feel, maybe resentful is not the right word, but I would feel like, oh, there was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, like it wasn't maximized what could have been done.
Like our government never pushed it, but Korea, as soon as Psy had his hit, Korea actually sunk money into pushing K-pop worldwide.
Yeah.
And you see the part of the net effect of that right now. K-pop is huge.
A whole another generation came out.
Yeah. So if you were a Japanese artist, I could understand if you looked at that and said, well, that's a missed opportunity. Why did we not try to do this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like J-pop is any amount inferior to K-pop. I think we put out good product, but nobody in America listens to Japanese music.
Yeah, I don't really know of any fans of it. So it seems like it's more popular in Japan and maybe other Asian countries.
Right. And it could be perfect. I'm sure it's perfectly good stuff.
Yeah, it's probably just as good as K-pop. I wouldn't even know, but probably is.
But you don't know, and you know what? You probably never will, because it's just not...
It's not accessible. Like, how would I even know who's good and like, oh, where can I find...
look at how accessible it is. Right.
Where can I find who's like your number one artist with that?
I think it is a fair criticism, but I don't think it's a criticism of Korean companies or Korean artists. I think it is a criticism of the Japanese government, because they could have made the same decision and they just failed to.
Yeah, they just didn't think outside the box with that one.
I hate that term. I don't want to say think outside the box. They didn't anticipate. They didn't think to do this, right? So, that's just a loss. And I think that the market is sort of crowded out now, so it's a little too late. Or maybe it's not. Maybe they can still do it. Why not? They can try. Who knows? Maybe there's awesome Japanese artists that we're just not familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's him being critical of Korean artists or, the whole Korea-Japan thing. I don't think it's that either. I think it's just he feels like the Japanese government missed an opportunity.
Yeah. President Trump issued executive orders that were going to ban TikTok and WeChat from operating in the U.S. in 45 days unless they're sold by their Chinese-owned parent companies. So that means, I guess TikTok will have to be going away by September 15 unless somebody American buys it, which I've heard maybe Microsoft or maybe somebody rich will buy it. I bring this up because it seems like a lot of K-pop groups have not relied on, but then they use TikTok as part of their marketing. There's a lot of them that have a dance that they want people to learn that's associated with whatever new song that they have. There's tons of K-pop dance challenges that have been on TikTok. And I guess they're not too worried about the whole Chinese having all the data aspect of it. But yeah, K-pop groups use TikTok a lot. So I don't know how much that would affect them for the American market if we end up banning it, if no one buys it. Twice especially seems to use it a lot.
From what I understand, that's one of the major draws of TikTok. Teenagers watching other cute teenagers. Totally understand. When I was a teenager, I probably would want to see other cute teenagers. And my stars doing a 10-second dance, or the people I like doing a 10-second dance. But you know what? It's just really, it's not a big loss. You gotta believe me. It's not a big loss.
Like, other than, Chicken Noodle Soup had an actual dance, but ever since then, it seems like all the dances is just like people moving their arms. Like, not that much movement is involved because it has to fit on the screen and not be, you know, too dynamic. So, like, all the dances kind of look the same. It's like, oh, I did this with my arms. I swayed my hips. I did, they're all kind of the same thing.
And here's another thing. It's harming your media that you're receiving. Look at Somi's latest video. There was a lot of speculation about Somi's latest video that she had a very restrained choreography in order to make it TikTok friendly.
Oh, no.
Right? So she purposely, because we know that Somi is actually a good dancer. She could do good choreography.
Yeah, I remember her from 16, like early on.
But then many people speculated that, well, this feels awfully restrained. Why? To make it TikTok friendly. So if one of your major stars who's actually good at dancing can do really complicated choreography, they're restraining their dance in order to make it TikTok friendly. Ask yourself, is TikTok a net good, a net positive in the world? You just got a watered down performance from Selmi because she wanted to make her video TikTok friendly.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
I would argue that that is a net negative. That's bad. She just had a kind of a, sort of pedestrian choreography. So you guys could do it on TikTok. Oh, that's not good, man. Don't you want her to unleash her full abilities in her video?
Yeah.
I do.
I wish they wouldn't cater things to TikTok.
But they're incentivized to.
But they are going to anyway because it's a younger audience that's on TikTok. So it's like, I want to get them hooked onto my songs.
So in that sense, it's bad. But this is not, none of these are reasons to actually ban TikTok, even if it's a net negative for some music video or whatever. The real reason is that, yes, China is spying on you. So please, this is a good reason to delete it and to ban it. That's all I got to say about TikTok.
Well,
Jesus.
I looked at some articles about, here's the K-pop dance trend. It seems like one of the most popular ones was Zico Any Song. But see, that was popular on TikTok, but he's not a dancer. So, okay, it's fine for him because maybe he doesn't really have any, he wasn't going to have any complicated choreography to begin with. So it works out for him. But for other K-pop stars, it's going to hamper them because they're going to be tempted to not have anything hard in their song.
Right. See? And remember that part of what drew us to K-pop, a lot of people to K-pop, is how amazing the choreography, the production value was. This is part of what drew us to it. If they're just going to regress to simple choreography, that's no different than Western artists, guys. You're neutering part of what makes them so awesome. No. So TikTok, overall, net negative.
The Korea Society is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of awareness, understanding, and cooperation between the United States and South Korea. They've decided to give their highest honor this year, called the James A. Van Fleet Award, to BTS as one of their recipients. So this year, the 2020 winners are BTS, American veterans who served in the Korean War, and the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So that's wow, that sounds like a really big deal because I looked on the list of the past winners and it's CEOs of Korean companies and presidents, George W. Bush won this in 2017 and it's the president of the Boeing company, I guess the one in Korea, and chairman and CEO of all these other very important companies are some past winners. So it seems like this is a really big deal, and I don't know if it's really kind of odd the ones who won this year though. I mean, BTS and American veterans who served in the Korean War and Korea Chamber of Commerce. It's seems like two of those are about helping the economy, and then American veterans in the Korean War is just kind of a different category of an award.
Does anyone remember the Korean War?
I mean, that was
I don't think anyone remembers it at this point.
70 years ago.
It was in the 50s.
I guess they decided it's time to give them an award. But wow, it seems like a big honor for BTS. I don't see...
Well, previous winners include George W. Bush and Lee Soo-man.
Yeah.
And UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon.
So I guess you have to be Korean or American to be a winner of this and have done something pretty important for both of those countries. Sounds like.
My first question is, why is it named after a Dutch? What does this Dutch person have to do with a Korean award? I don't get it. Contributions to the promotion of U.S.-Korea relations. Well, I guess it's very specific. It's about U.S.-Korea relations.
Yeah, anything that helps that.
Well, given the context of the award, who but BTS deserves this award more? It's not illogical at all. Nobody has done more for U.S.-Korea relations than BTS, I would argue, in the history, even going back to the Korean War, okay? BTS they've made such inroads for Korean culture. How could you not give it to them? They should probably win this for the next 3 years.
That's true. If you're being fair, it's who has
Well,
done
yeah,
the
because
most
I'm
for?
reading about this and it says contributions to the promotion of U.S.-Korea relations. Now, I don't know why some Dutch person, I mean, just like ethnically Dutch, Van Fleet, is that a Dutch name? That is, right? Van is Dutch.
Okay, I looked up his Wikipedia.
Van is Dutch.
James A. Van Fleet was a U.S. Army officer during World War I, World War II, and the Korean War.
Oh, wow, he's fought in a lot of wars.
And he was the commanding general of the U.S. Army and other UN forces during the Korean War. Okay, so he was like in charge of everything during the Korean War. Wow, I didn't even know that.
Was that correct? I thought MacArthur was... No, that wasn't right? I thought MacArthur...
It says whatever, he's the commanding general. So it sounds like he was a guy on the ground.
Could have sworn that MacArthur was the... Anyway, this is... Oh, okay. Yeah, MacArthur was a...
I don't know the different
Remember,
titles.
because like Truman fired him?
Who does what?
I thought Truman fired him. Wasn't that correct? Okay, this is like... Okay. So, anyway, it is about American-Korean relations. And in that context, how could you not give it to BTS? They've done more for American-Korean relations since Douglas MacArthur. For those who don't know who that is, great American general, led forces in the Korean War. He's the reason why there is a South Korea as opposed to just a Korea run by the North. I don't want to say he's the reason. He's one of the main reasons, right? For those who don't remember, there was a Korean War and like the communists pushed down and then MacArthur got in there and he pushed them back.
Yeah.
And then they got to that line and then he said, you know what? Screw these communists. Let's just go all the way to China. Because there were communists in China supporting the North Koreans at the time. And he just wanted to, I guess you could say he just wanted to deal with them right then and there. But our president at the time, Truman, right? Was it Eisenhower yet? No, it was Truman. He said, no, that's a bad idea. And I think he was fired, right? MacArthur was fired. And at the time, this was not a popular move. People thought, why are you firing this great general? Anyway, he did it. So, now you have a North and South Korea. I'm not saying it would have been right to continue pushing on. I'm not saying it would have been wrong. I'm just saying, just giving you a little history, interesting history lesson. This is what happened. This is why you have a North and South Korea.
Ever since then.
If there wasn't a MacArthur, maybe it would just be all one Korea that's communist.
It would all be like a North
Yes. And if MacArthur was allowed to do what he wanted, he would have pushed into China, and maybe you would just have a unified Korea that's all South Korea, a democratic Korea.
Right. But
And
they didn't want to let him go that far.
No. They didn't want to let him because he wanted to go to war with China. He was just thinking, well, there's communists up there. He probably was thinking they're going to have to fight him eventually. So let's just do it now.
But yeah, I guess they didn't want to go that far and then bring China into all this.
Right. Because then it wouldn't have been a Korean war. It would have been a U.S.-Chinese war.
Yeah. Then it'd be like a World War III.
I don't know if it would have been a world war, but it would have been a much larger war. And so his bosses said, no, we're not going to do that. By the way, you're fired. And then he left. But in the court of public opinion, he was a winner at that time because he was a war hero. Still, from World War II, he was a war hero, right? He was a big general in the Pacific Theater, and people respected him and respected his decision-making. So when he was fired, it was wow, this is such a nice history lesson for people who are not familiar. But anyway, that's what happened. That's sort of why you have a North and South Korea.
So it sounds like this Van Fleet was in charge when everything ended. So I guess South Korea thinks, well, this guy was such a great leader for us, and we like him.
He might have.
That's why they named the award.
Yeah, I'm not
after
educated
him.
about it, but he might have been in charge for the later periods when they were when things were dying down,
right?
And they were integrating South Korea into the world economy and things like that. So he's definitely, obviously, an important figure in U.S.-South Korea relations.
Yeah,
the award is named after him. Totally appropriate. BTS is winning it. Also totally appropriate. Who has done more for U.S.-South Korea relations than BTS? I would argue nobody. So congratulations. You guys should win it.
Yeah, that seems like a big honor. And they're supposed to receive the award on October 7th, and they're still doing virtual stuff then, so they don't get to accept it in person or whatever. So that's
fine. Nothing is accepted in person. It's fine.
But they are the youngest recipients to ever receive the award, which
makes sense. Yeah.
All the other people are CEOs and presidents and stuff.
Right.
So.
Or like UN Secretary Generals or something like that. Right. But although Why did the UN Secretary General? Well, I mean, he's Korean. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
You're the UN Secretary General. I don't know. I don't think that really has a big impact on U.S. Korean relations specifically, but it is an important person. Mm-hmm. So I think it's totally fair to award him. Yeah, good for them and totally deserved. You know, people think that maybe it's not that important. Oh, you're pop stars. But remember, I don't know who said it. Multiple people have said it, but it's been said that politics is downwind from culture. So all of the important things that you think are happening as far as political events and things like that, they are important. That's where laws are made. That's where decisions to go to war and stuff like that. All of that stuff, it's made in the political arena, right? But it has been said that politics are downwind from culture. So the culture happens first and the politics follow. So impacting the culture, you know, the hearts and minds of just regular people and the way they live and the way they view things, that has an ultimate impact on how your country behaves on the world stage and what policies are enacted and things like that. I am a believer that that's true. Politics are downwind from culture. So if you're impacting the culture of relations or the culture of a state, then ultimately you will impact other, you know, quote unquote, important things, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You will. You absolutely will. So them impacting the culture of U.S.-South Korea relations, it matters. If we have, let's say we have a stronger affinity and a stronger relation with South Korea based on, you know, BTS, I don't think it's that insane to argue that, well, we will be more likely to defend their sovereignty, right? And their sovereignty is still it's still a question up in the air, right? There is still a South Korea and a North Korea. That exists. That dynamic exists. So if that question ever comes to violence, let's say, what will the United States do? What will our response be? You know, will we just say, well, we'll let you guys sort it out. We don't really care that much. Or will we say, no, you guys are culturally very close to us and an important ally, so we will invest resources into making sure that South Korea exists. Which one will we do? And part of that stems from the culture that is cultivated, from little things like listening to BTS, right? I don't want to say they're directly related because that sounds very stupid. I'm like, oh yeah, so we listen to BTS, so we're going to spend millions of dollars on the military to protect the sovereignty of South Korea. No, obviously those things are not directly one-to-one correlated. But there is a connection, there is a relation where politics is downwind of culture. And if our culture is one of affinity to South Korean culture, it really does make an impact. And that's good. I mean, it's good if you are invested in the idea of South Korea continuing as a state, right? You want them to continue being an independent state. You probably do want the United States to support that, right? Not that if we didn't support it, they wouldn't be a state. I think that at this point, they are probably strong enough to they'll be fine on their own. But it never hurts to have a strong ally on your side, such as the United States. So it is one of those things.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool that just BTS winning this award that I even heard what it is. You know, it's like, okay, well, now I learned something. And this whole Korea society even exists, and that talking about strengthening relations between the two countries. Like, wow, that's a great thing that they're doing. Thank you to our guest, Morgan. You can find BTS Happy Hour on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, Castbox, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. New episodes weekly. Please comment, leave a review, or rate wherever you're listening to the podcast. Follow BTS Happy Hour on Twitter and Facebook. Until next time, this has been BTS Happy Hour. Thanks for listening, and remember, make every hour a happy one.